Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pestana, and we're here today with special guest, Donna Seebo. Now, Donna is a dear friend of mine, and she's just such an amazing person. She's an international radio show host, producer, media personality, award-winning author, keynote speaker, mental practitioner, counselor, communications specialist, and minister. So welcome to the show, Donna Seebo.
Well, it's a delight, Marianne, being with a fellow broadcaster because it's always fun to share this, that, and the other. Let people know that there's all kinds of unique individuals out in the world.
Well, it's such an honor to have you here, Donna. I consider you one of my dear friends, and gosh, we've known each other what seems like forever. You have such a remarkable background. So what got you started in radio?
Well, it actually was television that got me started in radio. And that sounds a little backwards because usually people go the other way around. But when I was doing my psychic work down in California, I originally was in Southern California, and then I got married, and my husband was transferred up to Hayward, California. While I was in Hayward, we were only there for about a year before he was transferred up here to the Pacific Northwest. But during that year, there were people that learned about what my work was, what I did, and they invited me to be on their television show. And they also had call-ins on that television show, and it was for an hour. I had never done anything like that, so I said, sure. Well, it was a piece of cake for me. I just really enjoyed myself. I enjoyed talking to the callers. Their phone lines were packed. We just had a great time. We ended up moving up here, and I didn't know anybody up here. I was invited to be an assistant minister at a Unity church because I'm a minister myself, and they found out about my work, what I did, and they said, we'd love to have you as part of our team. So I was working as an assistant minister, and one of the administrators at the church said, gee, Donna, you're just so amazing. We really enjoy having you here. She said, but I want you to meet someone. And as it turned out, it was a man by the name of Mike Moran. Mike Moran was considered the top talk show host in this area of the Pacific Northwest at the time. And this was in the early 80s. So he had a very bad taste in his mental mouth regarding psychics. He really had some very, very bad experiences with them. And he had this friend, Patty, that I knew at the church. And he said, nah, I'm not interested, Patty. She said, oh, yes, you will be. You need to have her on your show. She is not what you have experienced before. So he invited me after we had had an interaction of a type. And he said, okay, come on to the show, Donna, but I have to warn you that we have a very strong fundamentalist environment in our citizenry here. And he said, they're probably just going to rip you to shreds. And I said, it's okay. No big deal. And I really mean, that was my feeling. I didn't care. And when we were in studio, he warned me again. He said, they're just going to eat you alive. So he said, do you need any astrological information, so on and so forth? I said, no, all I want the person to do is to give me their first name, or they can even call themselves Tony the Tiger. I don't care. But I want to know that they're listening to what I'm saying. He said, okay. So I said, they just can give an initial if they want. Doesn't make any difference. I just want to know that they're listening. So we did that. He said, you're not to say anything. Just let her talk, and then we'll talk to you. So I got the first call, and they had 4 open lines on the telephone base there at the studio. And he said, he announced that I was going to be on the air, and before he knew it, every single phone line was packed. And it stayed that way for almost 2 hours. We just did one call right after the other. And that's the way I work. I do not ask questions of people. I don't do anything but just give what I call the downloads in the beginning, and then we can have conversation afterwards. But I like to do that so people understand there's no game, there's no gimmick here. I don't know who I'm talking to. This is just all skill of the mind. And it blew him away. And then he would question people afterwards. And when he finished his questioning, he would get such a response. And what was fun is that in the studio, he had a window. The way his terminal, I would say, of equipment was placed, he could look out the window. Well, at that time, other people from other parts of the station, because they had multiple shows going on, they would come in as soon as they found out what I was doing. They were waving at him and saying, let me call in or whatever. It was really fun. And today I even have a friend that worked as a reporter at that studio. And in fact, I just had a meeting with her this past week, and she remembers vividly what I did on the air that very first show and the shows afterwards, because Mike asked me then if I would do a program with him. And I would do it on a regular basis. And he had, at that time, there was an RV that the station owned, and he would be at the fair or he would be out someplace on a freeway. It was all about promoting the station because the letters of the station were really big on the side of the RV. And I would go wherever he was, and we would do a show. And it's fun now, when you're asking me these questions, it's fun to recall that, because it was so open and it was so much fun to be able to do it, to be able to show no matter where you are, no matter what environment you're in, the skills of mind work. And you don't need any tools. You don't need any kind of gimmicks of any kind. It's just there. And then after Mike and I developed programming, then there was the opportunity, because of a client of mine, to go to Alaska. And she had called me. This was in the month of September. She called me and she said, "Donna, what will it take to bring you up to Alaska?" And Alaska to me was like talking about Mars. My awareness of the state of Alaska was next to nothing. And all I knew is what I saw in a National Geographic magazine one time, and that was this tremendous picture of everybody freezing. That's all I knew about Alaska, was that it really got cold. And it was a photo of kids standing in snow, and I said, "Alaska? Do I really want to go to Alaska? I don't know that I want to go to Alaska." So anyway, I told her, I said, "Well, you get me on the top radio show up there and I'll come up to Alaska." That's all I said. Now, I did not think that she was going to do anything. I was totally engrossed with, working and doing what I was doing. And that was the last thing on my mind. And towards the end of September, she calls me and she says, "Donna, I have you booked on a show with the top talk show host in Anchorage, Alaska." And I swear, my mouth dropped 45 feet. I could not believe what she had done because I didn't expect her to do it. She just didn't appear to me to be the kind of person that would do that, but she did. So I end up going to Alaska and doing a show up there with a personality who was the top talk show host in the entire state. His name was Herb Shainlin, and bless his soul, he was a brilliant man. But let me tell you, he loved to get guests on his show and shred them into nanobits. He was so sharp and so intelligent. And I've got an image of him. He gave me a certificate for having survived a show. And he looks like the devil. They even put horns on his head in the image that they have of him. He was not a nice person to most people. Well, I had no idea about it. And my client, who became a very good friend, Linda, she said, "Oh, well, Donna, I'm going to drive you over and we are going to be there and you've got a 15-minute interview." That 15-minute interview ended up being for 2 hours. And those phone lines were packed from the time we started speaking. And I just started, when he said, "What do you need?" I said, "I don't need anything. Just tell them to give me their first name or initial, and then I'll take it from there." And he kept a log on everything. So that was Alaska. And then I did radio in Canada. I've done it in Spain. I've done different international shows. And during this time, I found, especially after working with Herb, and I was working with him for 23 years. I was a regular on his show. And when I worked with him, what was very real to me is that I wanted to have a show of my own. And this was something that was very deep in my psyche. And his producer, her name was Norma Heron. She became a very dear friend, wonderful woman. She was from England and a real down-to-earth gal. And I'll never forget standing outside of the hotel I was staying in Anchorage, downtown Anchorage, Alaska. And I told her my dream. I said, I want to have an international program. Now, we're talking about the 90s at this time, because the internet had started up before 1990, but in the 90s, the internet was evolving. And in my mind, I could see myself doing a show, and I didn't quite know exactly the format I would like to have. She said, "Donna, your dream is going to come true," but she said, "Realize it's just far too expensive at this time, and it's not worth the stress. You just keep on what you're doing, and when the time comes, you're going to be able to do what you envision doing." And as it turned out, there were stations here in the Pacific Northwest owned by private individuals, not conglomerates like today, but private individuals that had the stations actually for as long as 40, 50 years. And they invited me to participate. And this one station in Fife, Washington, I was there. I was with another small station here in Lakewood, Washington. And then I was on major stations in Seattle. And I was doing like one show a week. I was doing different appearances. And the opportunity opened up for me in 2001 for me to start my daily radio show. And that's not something many people like to tackle. Because if you do a radio show on a daily basis, Monday through Friday, and it's an hour show, you've got a lot of material you need to work with. And I said, I want to do it. And so I would have books, I would have magazines, I'd do all kinds of things, and I was taking callers too. And that was something that I did for a number of years, and I went to a major station in Seattle. And then after that, after a few years of doing that, then in 2001, like I said, I started doing it on a daily basis. And then it was about, let me see, I've been doing my show for 22 years now, going on 22 years. It was 14 years ago that I ended up going to the internet. And I started 8 years ago with my own network. And it was really fascinating when I looked at the evolution I went through because of the changes in technology. And I think about what we're doing today, Marianne, and how you and I are able to talk, we're able to communicate via email, there's texting, there's phone calls, there's the internet, there's just so much that is going on that's available today. And the environment of radio has changed, but it's still one of the most viable areas of communication available. And that's a little bit of the background. So this has not been a short journey. It has been a journey that has encompassed a good portion of my professional career.
So when did you start adding books to the mix? I know that you're a best-selling author, keynote speaker. When did you decide it was time to start writing books?
Actually, that started back in the 70s. There was a story that I wrote. I was a single mom. I didn't have much money at all. And I got the story God's Kiss. and I'll call it a download. It's not a long story, but it's especially relates to Christmas and a little boy named Johnny. And he has a dream experience that takes him into a valley with children and animals from all over the world. And they're there for this magical moment. And it is all of the children of the world, all of the animals of the world experiencing God's kiss. And what that kiss is snowflakes. And the artistry that was done by Ed Gedros, that took place 20 years after I wrote the story. I had been told by a number of people that received the story in their Christmas cards the year that it was written. And they said, oh, this should be made into a movie. This is beautiful. You must write a book. As I said, it took me 20 years before that book came into its own. And to this day, it is loved by anyone that shares it with a child because it's multicultural, it's non-denominational, and it's all about love and about children knowing they are loved. That was the beginning. But I had already been writing articles for, a little church magazine, and I was working as an executive secretary at a particular company, and I put together their very first newsletter, put together articles and all kinds of things. So the writing has always pretty much been with me, if not in journaling, in writing stories, but the actual publication of books started in the 90s, the middle 90s. And then there was another one that I put out, and they've been self-published. And right now I'm in the process of wanting to get to a publishing house because I've got so many different stories that I would like to be able to work with. And I've got a series, but the artistry in every single one of them is absolutely beautiful. There is The Magic Hat, which is about a child who's healed by the story of a nurse. It's literally about mind over circumstances matter. And then The Woodcutter and the Tree, which is about the environment. And I've just gotten so many fabulous statements relative to people reading that and the kids really responding to it. They relate that. Mind Magic was done. That is about development of psychic ability. That was done in an audio form. It was not put into a book. But I love doing it. I love studio work. I really enjoy what I do. I love doing my broadcasting. I love my counseling. I love speaking. I just feel that I'm one of these very, very fortunate and very rich women that I have the opportunity to interact with the thousands of people that I have through the years. I just feel very, very fortunate.
I have such an appreciation for your work, and I know many people do as well. You have this amazing background as a counselor and mental practitioner. So let's talk about that. When did that become part of your story?
Actually, that has been a part of my life from as far back as I can remember. And when I say that, I'm not saying that I didn't have to earn the right to be a counselor. But what happened is I found in retrospect, when I reflect on when I was growing up, it seemed like people would often come to me and talk to me and share their stories, their concerns, their worries. I remember in high school, one girl that I knew that was my same age, she was a teenager, she had been raped. I was the person she came to talk to about it. And there just seemed to be this ability, and I did not relate it to anything psychic. I didn't even know what psychic was. I came from a Catholic Lutheran background. So you hear about the saints and all of these other phenomenal stories of the paranormal that are just very much accepted within the church. But if you were to say someone was psychic, you'd automatically get slapped down. So I didn't even know the word, really. But it's very interesting to me. It was a natural part of me. And then when I became aware that I had skills of mind that could be used, and I was told this by the woman who was my mentor. Her name was Gloria. This was a very, very gifted lady. She was a professional astrologer, and she was extraordinarily gifted psychically. And the first time I ever talked to her was over the phone. It was after I'd had a series of very, very bad dreams. I'd call them nightmares. That's what I considered them at the time because I didn't know how to think any differently about them. And I called her up one night, and I'd been given her number by a neighbor that happened to be the sister-in-law of my very best friend at the time. And she said she could help me. And I said, wonderful. And I shared what I had experienced with her. She took it apart like one would take apart a puzzle. And she put it all back together. And when she put everything back together, I was stunned because it wasn't anything negative at all. What the dreams were telling me was that I was entering into a brand new territory. I was going into a space and I was protected. There was no harm that was going to come to me. Although people would try to confine me, it was not going to be a negative. Well, sure enough, that's what evolved. I had the good fortune of knowing her for 2 years. She is the one that made me aware that I had skills of mind. And she referred me to a spiritualist church that at that time, and I think it still exists, it was in Gardena, California. And she said, I want you to go there. And I said, why? I don't understand. What is it that I'm going to get there? She said, you'll find out. And she said, this is a safe place. You'll be able to practice. Again, and I was in my early 20s. You know, you're really pretty brain dead when you're in your early 20s. And I can remember looking at her and saying, what in the world are you getting me into? I don't know anything about this. What is this all about? So I end up going to a class, and to make a long story short, not only did I find that I had ability, but that ability could be refined, and it could be used, and it could help people. And through the assistance with Gloria and the interaction with so many different talented people that were associated with the spiritualist church, people that had all kinds of skills and abilities, it just opened up my world, and I was associated with them for 10 years. And then the minister of the church, and I'd been the assistant minister for most of those 10 years, he said, it's time for you to be ordained, Donna, so that you could operate in a ministerial capacity. This is what you've been doing all of these years. And I had just recently gotten married, and I said, okay. But that really wasn't what I was interested in. I wasn't interested in being a minister, although that's what I do all the time. That is something that in my young mind, I just didn't, feel like that was it. And upon doing that, and it was, I think a few months before I was ordained, people were coming to me and wanted to use my services professionally. And that surprised me. That really did. Because I didn't think, this isn't how someone could make a living. But as it turned out, it has evolved. And this is my life. This is my work. And it's all because of someone else recognizing my talents. Not me recognizing them, but someone else. And I'm very grateful to her because this is something that I just embrace. I'm just as fascinated with skills of the mind today as I was when I was first made aware of them in a mindful way, and that they serve us. And I'll tell you what, Marianne, I am looking at today, especially with the COVID situation we went through, I am looking at an explosion of women especially becoming aware of their own intuitive skills. And it's a delightful thing to see. I'm really glad to see it. Because the more we can harmonize the intuitive self along with the logical self, that's balancing the female and the male self within all of us, it is such a resource. It is going to create phenomenal blessings and tremendous shifts as well, which are happening right now.
That is so remarkable to have so many people in your past that are guiding your way. I know that you do that for a lot of people as well.
Yes, I do. That's part of what you call the payback. You see, my belief is that whatever skill you have, whatever ability you have, part of our responsibility, especially as mature individuals, is to be able to empower younger generations to understand that they are going to create their own future. They are not my future. They are their own future. And if they have support and they're willing to listen and to become aware of themselves, not just as individuals, but also as part of what I call a team of humanity that is about making things better, which every generation has the opportunity to do, they've got a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. And I've said repeatedly through the years, anyone like myself who is a teacher, who is going to share their knowledge, they always want those that they teach and that they share with to move forward and to even be better than they are. We always, if we are really dedicated to our work, realize that we are past a mantle, if you will, using an old term, of whatever skill, knowledge we have. And that's our job, to be able to pass along what we know to other people. And that's one of the reasons that I do my radio show. That's why I interview authors from all over the world, because it's important to understand that when people put into print what they feel, what their experiences are, there may be a gold nugget for an individual. They take the time to read. They may find a piece of themselves that resonates with that author, and that author maybe will give them insights into things that they would never have even considered because it wasn't a part of their world. So it's part of our job, I think. The older we get, the better it is when we can share, just like you with your programs and anybody else that's doing podcasts. And radio shows or television programming. It doesn't make any difference, even as a speaker. You want to be able to pass along what you know. And those that are younger can learn how to discern what works for them and what doesn't work for them. We all have to go through that journey, and it's an important one. But that's something that's been going on for millions of years with human beings. And we can either move forward, or we can have a dark age, as we know in human history at this time, or we're going to have a renaissance in our lives. So it's up to us to make the choice.
So, Donna, it seems that we're just in this really huge time of change. What do you think is holding people back right now?
Well, you've got a combination of things that are going on, Marianne. One, you have people that are still fearful. And one of the things that saddened me deeply was during the pandemic, I witnessed so many different individuals so paralyzed with fear because of what media promoted. And I would have people say, well, you just don't understand. We can die. And I go, yeah, I guarantee you're going to die. Every one of us is going to die. That's a fact. So what are you going to do to get on with living? That you're going to be wise about if you have an option to wear a mask, not wear a mask, keep your hands clean. This is common sense, for heaven's sakes. The ancients used it. If someone was sick, you isolated that sickness. You didn't put him in with other people. We have known for generations that if you are in a heavily crowded area and there's a flu bug going around, you're probably going to get it. But if you use common sense, you won't. But sometimes you get sick. I know I have at different times in my life. I got sick one time with a flu that was so devastating. It was literally paralyzing. It was just absolutely awful. Nobody else around me was sick. Where did it come from? I'll never know, nor will anybody else. So when you have a paranoia that's encouraged, and you have the fear, and it's still here. I had a conversation just with someone yesterday, and they were just over the top in fear. And I didn't say a word to them because what I say is not going to make any difference to them. I am not fearful of that. I realize, yes, you can get sick, but people have been getting sick since the beginning of our occupation on this planet. This is something, though, I understand it went around the world. Flu goes around the world every year. That is what we're dealing with. And the flux is, I don't know that I want to go back to my job. I don't know that I want to do this. I don't know that I want to do that. And you can live in fear. You can isolate yourself. But it's not going to enable you to live life. And I've seen people do this. It had nothing to do with the flu. They had all kinds of excuses. I know of people even today that had nothing to do. It had nothing to do with COVID. But they have created their own drama. And people need to go through a flux like this. We all do. Why? Because we're either going to wake up and grow up into the fact that as human beings, we have a right of choice. And we have a right of deciding how we're going to handle certain situations. And it's important for us to not just believe everything that media says, and I'm in media and I'm telling people this. Be discerning. Ask questions. There's a lot of people that claim certain sciences about different things, but they probably, in many respects, it's just their own bias, their own opinion. They don't know all of the facts. Now, we're finding out a lot of things today that were not made public before. But that's life. That's what happens. So we have an opportunity to grow. And if we grow, we're going to say, I'm going to do what is practical and what is comfortable, and I'm going to be wise here. And I'm going to go about living my life. If a person is in flux relative to career, that's not a bad thing. Because maybe they had had a job that it gave them security, as they like to define it, and they find that it's not something they want to be with. A lot of people are dealing with the reality of death. And death, I think, in the Western cultures, so often is so feared. And it is not an enemy. But of course, I say that because of the work that I do. I don't see anything more than really the physical body being just released. It no longer works. I loved what a friend of mine said. She was in her 80s when she said this to me. There was a conversation that came up for some reason or another about dying because she was in her 80s. And she said, that is the last thing I'm worried about. She said, I want you to know I've already put in my order to the universe for a much more efficient and better looking chassis. She said, this one just never fit the bill the way I would have liked it to. We had a good hearty laugh over her attitude, but she was never concerned about that. Her concern was that she have a quality life, that she be of service in some way. And I think that was just a very, very positive example. And when I knew her, I was in my 30s, my early 30s. And I thought, that is the way that I want to be able to look at life. And for some reason, death has not been a subject that I've been afraid of, but so many people are. And that is really what is at the core, is fear itself. So it's getting past that. And I think that's one of the gifts that this pandemic brought to people. And that is that they need to be aware that life is to be lived. None of us are going to be immortals. We have physical chassis just like our cars that will wear out, that will need to be replaced. And to me, it's that basic.
In the U.S., we are very resistant to discussing death and sometimes change. From your experience and viewpoint, what are some of the things that stop people from looking at this transition as a new process or a new beginning?
Let me state this at the beginning of answering your question. To me, the biggest enemies that we have in life are fear, ignorance, and superstition. One of the biggest challenges that I found for myself in working with people was, and even with myself, was the acknowledgement we don't know very much and that we need to be open to learning about different cultures, different belief systems, and be willing to be open to perhaps even challenging belief systems that we have been indoctrinated with. And this is not new to the human condition. When you look at Galileo and his research in science and making a statement and his time frame where he said the earth revolves around the sun, the world, the universe doesn't revolve around the earth. When he made that kind of a statement, he would have been put to death. Fortunately, he was just imprisoned for the rest of his life. However, you think about those times of history, and people today will say, well, they just didn't know very much. It's the same thing today. There are many, many doctors that are coming out, and I can say this specifically because I interview them. Doctors who in their medical profession will have patients say to them, I had this experience. I was out of my body. Now, every bit of logic, there is nothing in medical training that has given them any information about near-death experiences. So what's the first thing they're going to do? They're going to say, oh, you were hallucinating. You were under anesthetic. You weren't really under, you were hallucinating. No, the person was not hallucinating. They actually had the experience of being out of their body and watching everything that goes on. Let me share the story with you quickly. There was a woman whose class I attended, and this woman was a professional healer, and she was called in by a particular group of physicians periodically to be in prayer with her healing energy when they were doing surgeries. One night she gets a call. Now, she did this often enough where she would have a bag packed, ready to go to the hospital whenever she was called. She'd be called sometimes at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning because surgeries were being done, and a patient's life was on the line. Well, this one evening she's called. It's a physician she has never spoken with. He says he had his assistant call because he was getting prepped for surgery for the next day, which was a very, very serious operation. A man's life was in the balance. And he had heard about her. And his assistant called her and said, the doctor wants you in here at such and such a time. It was very early in the morning that he wanted her there. And she went in, and he did not know her, but he greeted her. He said, you're to be in scrubs. You're to have a mask on. This is what you will do, and you're to stand over in this particular corner in the operating room. I don't want you to say a word, but whatever it is that you do, do it. This person may not survive the surgery. She said, I'll do exactly that. That's what she did. She went into the operating room. She was all scrubbed. She didn't say a word. She was there. She did her prayer, did her healing treatments for the patient. Once the surgery was done, which took quite a bit of time, once that surgery was done, she was advised she was to leave. She goes home. That's it. She gets a call the next day from the doctor himself. He said, I would like for you to come into the hospital. Now, this was later in the day, and she said, certainly, when would you like for me to be there? And he told her the time, and he said, when you come here, I do not want you to say anything when I take you into the room of the patient. She said, fine. So she goes to the hospital. He meets her. He tells her the same thing. When I take you into the room, you are not to say one word. She said, fine. You already told me that, and I'll do that. So he steps into the patient's room. The patient was in intensive care. He tells the man, he said, I'm bringing someone into the room. And he did. The man looks at her. He's loaded up with tubes and everything else. And he said, that's her. That's the woman that was standing in the corner of the room. He said, she was praying for me. And he gave the information. She did not say one word. And the doctor looked at him and looked at her. He had never, ever experienced anything like that. This man identified her, described her hair. Now, she was in scrubs, but he knew who she was. He knew what she looked like. He knew exactly what she was doing. He had already told the doctor that he heard the conversation the doctor was having with a fellow physician about something that had nothing to do with the surgery, but it had to do with their personal lives while he was doing the surgery. The doctor was just flabbergasted. So that was a confirmation that this man actually had been outside of his body. When these situations happen, it creates a tremendous shift because you know it's real, but it doesn't fit into what you have been taught. According to most medical professionals, it's a bunch of hooey. I've just recently read materials by people who say, oh, this is a hallucinogenic effect. Baloney. It's not that at all. People can be in multiple dimensions. It's an experience. You cannot get it out of a textbook. So more and more doctors are writing about these experiences, what they call miracles. They can't explain. The world of science is beginning to catch up with what the shamans, for millions of years, we human beings have been on this planet for millions of years. They recently found some teeth and bones that are over 2 million years old in China. They've documented all of this. And people still will say, no, we've only been around for 7,000 years. Excuse me, I don't think so. So you see, science and the awareness of what I like to call spirit, energy, God, whatever term you want to use, it is real. It's not make-believe. But we human beings will attach all kinds of different words and descriptions to be comfortable with trying to communicate about it. Semantics is very important because that is how we share information with each other. And understanding people's cultures, understanding their belief systems, when you get down to the bare bones, it's very, very similar. You talk to an Amazonian shaman and you talk to a Tibetan lama, they have the same basic stuff. You talk to healers in all kinds of different denominations, it doesn't make any difference. It's the basic stuff. It's still there. But we get very arrogant as human beings. And we want to say that what this group does or that sect does or this cult does, that's the only is whatever. And it's a bunch of hooey. We all are what I like to call star people. We all are of the universe. And we're incredible. I'm looking forward to the day. And I hope that I will see it in my lifetime. Maybe not. But I do hope for the day when as human beings, we look at each other as human beings and not as enemies. And we're in a very interesting patterning right now. Very interesting. We have conflicts. We have all kinds of things that seem to be going haywire. Mother Nature is doing all kinds of things. But most people are not aware of things that are going on in different parts of the world that are affecting the weather as it is. Mother Nature has always been one to go through change. She's a perfect example of how we need to learn how to adapt and deal with change. She's one of the most efficient teachers you can ever have. Mother Nature is.
So with everything that's going on, what you think like the number one way that we can make a difference?
Just being true to ourselves. Being real people. Investing in ourselves. You know, there's not just one answer, Marianne, because we human beings are very complex. But when we can realize that who we are right here, right now, taking care of our world. And let's be frank, We can't be out saving the world. It doesn't work that way. But what works is when people invest in themselves, then look at, after doing that investment, my mentor used to call it, it's the I period. You know how 2-year-olds are? It's all about me, 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 me. Well, that's like I. And they do that. A 2-year-old does it because 2-year-old is trying to figure out, how are you going to keep your balance? What's going on here? Question you until your ears feel like they're going to fall off. And it's the way we need to be as adults. We need to be questioning. We need to be exploring. We need to invest in education. We need to read. We've got so many wonderfully talented people that are happy to share knowledge with us. But we have to find the little niche that's going to fit us. Some might want to become a beekeeper. Other people might want to do media. Other people might want to know how to fix shoes that are comfortable for people's feet, or doing prostheses, or space travel. You name it. It's finding what fits us, because we're all gifted with talents. And those talents, when we respect them, and we work with them, and we share them, and we give the best we possibly can, there's a ripple effect that happens. And it is amazing to me, because I've seen the ripple effect. It can be good, bad, or ugly. But the truth is that when you give the best of yourself, and when you invest in yourself so that you are stepping out of what you would consider a point of mediocrity, and you really want to shine, you really want to be the best, not because somebody tells you to, but because it's the right thing for you to do. You feel good about it. That's what we need to remember. And to be open, to be discerning. You don't want to be a garbage can for anything and everything. You want to discern what is right for you. That's part of becoming an adult. That's, part of what we have to grow into. We're all going to make mistakes, but it's taking pride and being aware that we are here because we have got something special to accomplish. And I don't care if you're a police officer, or a fireman, emergency worker, and you're dealing with the dark underbelly of humanity. I don't care who you are, where you are. That is what counts. And then you find that as you've invested in yourself, there are other people that you're going to be able to help and or work with cooperatively to achieve something that's very special. When I think of the people I've interviewed on my shows, and it's well over 10,000 people, when I think of all of these individuals from all walks of life, male, female, whatever gender classification you want to give to somebody, doesn't make any difference. They, each and every one of them, have enriched the world that they live in and the world that they bring to me as a broadcaster, because I'm able to share it with other people. And it's phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal. That's the ripple effect. And when you affect something in a positive way, your good is passed forward. And it keeps going forward. It keeps going forward. It keeps rippling out. It's passed along. And it just amazes me. It really, really does. How things seem to have a life of their own. They will grow. And that's what we need to do. We need to remember it begins with the me, myself, the I. And integrating with others, being discerning, being willing to learn. I mean, I can tell you, if you know how to scramble eggs, you can go to YouTube and find 550 million different other ways of fixing eggs. That's what life is about, is the diversity. I think it's exciting myself.
Well, it's always such a delight to spend time with you, Donna. This time goes by so quickly. Where can our listeners connect with you, be part of your community, and learn more about your work?
Well, they can go to my website, delphiinternational.com. I also have a website regarding my publications, which is Mrs. Seebo's Classics, and that's Mrs. MRSSEEBOS Classics.com, Delphi, DELPHI, and then the word international.com. They'll find the link to my network, and they can listen to my network. It's on iHeartRadio, iTunes, Alexa. All people have to do is talk to their phone and say the Donna Seebo Show, and they'll be able to find a link, and my archives are up 24/7.
Well, Donna, thank you for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Marianne, it has been absolutely delightful, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts.
Well, thank you, Donna. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you. I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.